Hello. This is the Power of Our Story, a place where like-minded people get together to build a tribe and to support one another through the different journeys in life, sometimes the difficult journeys. Uh, we join together on a regular basis to support and uplift one another, to learn from one another. And today we have an exciting opportunity to talk to Pat Welsh and hear his story about his experience in life and how he ended up where he's at and his journey and faith and learning throughout all of this. So, Pat, I'm really excited to have you here today. Pat, you have over 40 years experience doing a variety of things. And I was wondering if you could tell us, start way back as far as you can, and tell us about the path that led you to the road you're on right now.
One, I appreciate you guys having me on and getting to share a little bit of my story. Wayback Machine would take us all the way back to 1957. And I have kind of intersecting careers and experiences, and I am a firm believer in divine intervention. Faith has been what has carried me and our family through a lot. And it literally, when I was born, my birth mother was a widow, and I was born in Dublin, Ireland. And when I was 3 days old, she took a taxi to an orphanage, a Catholic orphanage, and dropped me off and got in a taxi and left. I was there 16 months and was adopted by an American family and went from Dublin, Ireland to Kansas City, Missouri, and lived there till I was like 12 years old, and then we ended up moving to Ohio. And so I took a really weird. It's a whole lot of things. When I was in second grade, I was accidentally, at least I think it was accidentally, bumped off of monkey bars, and I suffered a fractured skull. I was in a coma. I received last rites, if you have to be Catholic. We called it last rites back then, anointing of the sick, and it was really iffy, how I was going to turn out. And I turned out, I came out of the coma, and got back to a normal life, if you will. I think it knocked some sense and maybe even some intelligence into me, because I'm a talker. I'm 100% genetically Irish. I even did the 23andMe. I have nothing but 100% Irish. So I was a talker in grade school, and the nun that ran my third grade class moved me from the back of the room to the front of the room because I was too busy talking because I was getting my work done. And so she gave me extra work. Unbeknownst to anybody, the extra work was the entire fourth grade curriculum. So at the end of third grade, I had completed fourth grade, and they had to figure out how to tell my parents they were going to push me to the fifth grade. So I ended up going to school. I used to get my butt beat all the time because I wasn't a real fifth grader to the real fifth graders. And academically, I did well all the way through grade school, high school, went to college. Everybody said, "Hey, Pat, you'll be a great lawyer." So I said, "What the heck?" And I went to law school straight out of college. Became an assistant county prosecutor in Dayton, Ohio. Was married. We had two of our kids, up to five, by 1986. We got married in 1980. And my wife goes, "You hate working. You come home every day and you're mad. And what do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to be in law enforcement, and have since I was a little kid." She goes, "Then do it." So I transitioned out of practicing law. I kept my license and still did some stuff. And then I spent the next 27 years in law enforcement. And like Paul, I started out as a beat cop. And when I retired in 2012, I was superintendent of operations for Dayton, Ohio Police Department. And so that's kind of the professional career. When I retired, we moved to Colorado, which is where I'm at now. And we've gone through a lot that really faith-wise has sustained me personally and individually, as well as our family. My wife was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 2004. We experienced we started a prayer chain, and it was an emergency diagnosis. And 3 days later, she was going in for surgery, and they were going to, the doctor said if she survives the surgery, it will last 4 hours. 45 minutes into the surgery, they were done and came out. The doctor came out and he goes, I got everything, and I got to go see other patients. And I'm like, hey, did she have to have chemo, radiation? What are we doing? Nope, got everything, and looked at his watch and said, I have to go see other patients. And my wife's doctor got a hold of me a couple of days later, and she goes, you want to hear the real story? And I go, okay, what? She goes, I saw all the x-rays and everything. Marilyn, my wife, she had two very large, well, one very large 10-ounce tumor on one ovary and a smaller tumor on the other ovary. And her whole abdomen was filled with masses, small masses. And in 3 days, it went from all that to, when they opened her up, all the masses were gone, small ones. And both ovaries twisted themselves like a balloon, if you will, and basically killed themselves, cut off the blood supply, and then killed the tumors. And so he got everything. And the guy, he said he told my wife's doctor all this. He goes, I'll never admit that, I don't believe in miracles, but I don't know, there is no way to explain medically what we just encountered. But I thought I'd let you know when I opened your patient up, this is what we saw. So from that to just all sorts of other things, divine. I told you I was adopted, and right before I was 40 years old, I actually met my birth mother and sister in Ireland, and I wasn't even trying to find her. And that's a whole, thanks to the internet, I guess, that's a whole another God working his way. If you're in law enforcement, I don't know, Pat and Paul, if you ever did midnights, but yeah, when you're on midnights, man, you can't sleep on your days off. Like we work 6 off 2, work 7 off 2, work 7 off 4. On your 2 days off, you just stayed up and didn't break your cycle. And so I was on a 2-day off, and 4 o'clock in the morning, and I jumped on the internet into a chat room, an Irish chat room, and I asked, hey, anybody here actually in Ireland? And one kid goes, yeah, I am. And I said, where at? And he goes, Dublin. I go, hey, it's St. Patrick's Infant Hospital still on Haddington Road. He's like, how do you know about St. Pat's? I go, I lived there. He goes, when? I said 1957 to 59. He goes, I was there in 1975. And he goes, did you ever find your birth mother? I said, nope, never even looked. He goes, well, call this nun if you want. The orphanage is closed, but the offices are open. What the heck? I called this nun. She called me back a couple days later and said, I found your birth mother and you have a sister. Can I give them your information? I said, yeah, absolutely. And that isn't the miracle, the divine intervention. When we went over, and my mom and dad and my wife, we all went over together, is after we visited for 3 days, my sister called me later, several months later, and she goes, because this was in September of 1997, and my sister called me around Thanksgiving and says, I just have to tell you this, Mummy, which is what she called her, for the last 40 years has gotten depressed and sick from November 1st into January. This year it didn't happen because my birthday's in November. So all these years, 40 years, my sister's older than I am. All these years, she got depressed and because of the holidays of my birthday and the healing that God brought to her through some kid that was in the same orphanage I was 20 years later than me, was like just mind blowing how that all worked out. So that was not the Reader's Digest of my path, but that's kind of where I'm at today. Now I'm retired and help run an international consulting company. So.
That's an amazing story. And it seems like while you're telling it here, the miraculous things that have happened almost seem like just steps along the way. But taking a moment to reflect on them, it's unheard of. It's amazing what happened with your wife and what happened with you suddenly finding your mom and your sister. What happened with your mom and your sister in that relationship?
It continued until my birth mother passed away in 2001. Had been a cancer survivor herself, but she was 84 years old and just had some health issues. But we stayed in touch with both my birth mother and my sister. And my sister and I still stay in touch today. And the cool thing is, although the kids didn't get to meet their grandmother, they did get to meet an aunt that they didn't know they had. And we actually took them over to Ireland 1 year and spent a fair amount of time over there. My sister's been to the States a couple times. So they got to, and, the two little ones were little. And how cool is it that I have an aunt that lives in Ireland and talks funny. But so yeah, we've stayed in touch, and it's been a blessing for everybody. And it also, my sister grew up always wanting to have siblings, and she never did. And so that blessing she's had in her for the last, close to 20 years now. She finally got the brother that she always wanted and didn't know she already had. So
you can,
just real quick, and I know everybody always says, "Oh, how what a cool story." Not everybody, but when I share the story, and I have in a couple books I've written, and it was the chapter in another book called "Healing Happens." But what I really want to share with people is, from Jeremiah, and I'm not. This is the faith part. Is it's unique in that I tell my story, I think, but in reality, God knew you before you were ever conceived and had a plan for you before you were ever born. And so, to me, it's a fulfillment of that scripture. It's true, and I see it now. Of course, I can't remember who said it or if it's a song. We all know the beginning of our story. Only God knows the end. And we get to see it unfold, but it's a plan. So I think it's pretty cool.
That I can see the blessing in your change in demeanor when you talk about finding your mom and your sister, because your whole face and your smile light up and your demeanor changes. So I wish that your mom was here to see that, but I think she's looking at that and can see that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
And talking about your sister too, you just light up. So it's cool to see that with you. You talk about being guided down the path. Are there some times where you left the path and had to find your way back to it? And what did that look like?
Yeah, and part of it was, changing careers, so to speak, and going into law enforcement, and you have no seniority. I mean, of my 26 years with Dayton Police Department, 13 of it was on midnights. And so that is a huge, it has its negatives. And one of the, I didn't think I was straying from the path as I'm going through it, because I'm chasing bad guys, and I mean Dayton is a pretty violent city, and I had a great career. I mean, I worked narcotics, just all sorts of things. I was having a lot of fun, but it wasn't until after I retired. And my wife and I we're still married. We just had our 43rd anniversary in September. But she sucked it all up and kept it in. And then eventually, after I retired, to go, hey, I felt like a single parent raising our 5 kids, and that when we're on vacation on a beach, you're on the cell phone talking to an informant, and so I had to own those things. Ask for forgiveness. You can't undo it, but yeah, we get myopic in law enforcement. I think a lot in the fire service. You get myopic in that you have that tunnel vision of no 2 days are the same. It's not like being an accountant and you're going to go in and it's different numbers and maybe different clients. But my best definition anybody ever gave me of law enforcement is it's long periods of extreme boredom interrupted by moments of sheer terror. And there is, in the fire service, is the same. And so that adrenaline dump, and that's every day for 26 years. And it takes its toll on you, but also that adrenaline rush and taking bad people off the street and seeing the end results of a lot of work is very self-centered. Probably the best book I've read recently that really explained a lot of to me it's called Ego is the Enemy. And that, what a hard lesson to learn and then share that with other people. When I'm teaching cops around the country, I tell them, man, park your ego at the door. It's not about you. And if you really believe family first, then why are you signing up for a bunch of overtime? Why are you padding your down the road pension? You're not promised tomorrow. You may never collect that pension. So get your priorities straight. And those were, but then the flip side of that is Marilyn and I, we went through and completed a 4-year biblical studies program from Genesis through Revelation, 9 months a year, 1 day a week for 3 hours. I mean, homework, tests, and really together, we went through those 4 years, and that really improved our marriage. And it also really opened up our faith from the standpoint of it's not just academics. It's who Paul Harvey is. Okay, so the rest of the story, taking that 4-year course gave us a Paul Harvey experience, and we knew the rest of the story because we learned the history and the context and could tie not just Old Testament and New Testament, but other historical stuff that made, wow, this is so powerful. No wonder Paul got thrown into prison because of how radical the message that he was sharing. And that helped build us as faith people, but as just everyday human beings. I mean, it changed our whole outlook because you did it, I did it. Man, you get jaded when you're a cop. And I've been on over 300 homicides, and I could stand there and have a cup of coffee and eat a Danish and not be appalled that there's a dead body here, because that's a mechanism we developed, I think, self-defense. But it's at the expense of our relationship with the people that mean the most to us. And that's a really hard pill to swallow. It's why divorce rate's so high amongst cops.
Yeah, you're certainly right. I think that the ego piece is something we're actually taught as a survival mechanism too. I mean, being an academy instructor for a long time, you teach them things like you will win the fight. You will always come out on top. And that translates well to other things like accomplishments, but it doesn't translate well when you come home to your argument with your wife, because then you are in it to win it, and it's tough. What are some other tools? The Bible course sounds really interesting. And if you'd like to share the information on that, I'm sure a lot of people would benefit. But what are some other tools you've used to overcome the damage that's done by this tough job?
Well, one is I read a lot of the experiences that other cops have had. So like Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. Dave and I have become friends and done some shows together. And you're talking about win the fight, the bulletproof mind, but read his other stuff, that he's written that is in the faith-based arena. I've understudied and John Maxwell on leadership, and John started, and I spent 3 days with him back in 2013. John started as a small town pastor, and he's the number one corporate consultant in leadership. And so how you can take the principles that come out of the Bible and apply them in your work world, whatever path you're in. T. Cooper Smith, Bloody Sunday, SWAT Guy, California, great book. So the tools I use is I learn from other people's experiences. So maybe it might help me not have to go through some of the same stuff. And it's, believe it or not, Sun Tzu's Art of War. It's one of my favorite books. Nothing scriptural about that, but the principles in it from a leadership standpoint, and how can you then combine those principles with John Maxwell's 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. So it's kind of a holistic approach, and being able to share your story and talk about it. I mean, we haven't even got into some of the other really dramatic stuff that we've been through. So
tell me about a time. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, good. No. Go.
Tell me about a time when you questioned your faith or struggled with it.
Yeah. This is hard. When our son died overseas, security forces, that was really tough. And we did. And part of what got us through that is a program called Harvesting Your Tears. So
I'm sorry to bring you back there, brother. That's tough. I asked the question because your faith is so strong. And I think we tend to look at people like you and think, well, he's got it all together. Of course. And talking about the tough times kind of helps us all to realize that we all go through it. And frankly, I think every character in the Bible, including Jesus himself, went through difficulties and times where they struggled with their faith. Even Jesus said, if you could take this cup from me, in the Garden of Gethsemane, as he struggled with what was about to happen. So I really appreciate you sharing that and letting us share that moment with you. I'm sorry to bring you there, though.
But it's necessary. And you talk about, I mean, everybody in the Bible. I mean, Peter denied Christ. Paul was killing Christians as Saul before he had his as I call it, his Jesus moment. Uh, and we all have, and when God works in your life, it can be that He knocks your butt off your horse, like He did Saul, later known as Paul, or it's the woman at the well. It can be in tender moments. It can be in when you're having quiet time, or it can be the knock on the door, getting a notice. So, but if you keep, and this is a hard lesson to learn, because what is it? Mike Tyson allegedly said, everybody's got a plan till you get smashed in the mouth. And when you're a young cop, and I'm the police and you're not, you have that heavy big badge syndrome and all that. We all have a plan till you get smashed in the mouth, and sometimes the circumstances are really horrific. But if you could keep focused on God knew you before you were ever conceived, He had a plan for you and a calling for you, and part of your task, if you will, is to discover that and then trust in God that there's a purpose for it. And I'm a firm believer. A lot of people, life's a crapshoot. No, it's not. There is a purpose, and you may not know what it is. I'll just tell you a really quick story, just as an example. I get sent on a call involving a 12-year-old kid that is running with the wrong crowd. His parents have him in private school, but he lives in a horrific neighborhood. So he didn't come home from school on this particular Friday. And so the parents, and it's mom and dad, they lived in a part of Dayton that was 90% African American, 95% single parent. So it's real unusual. So I don't get the missing call. He came home about 1:00 that morning. So I catch the call to go take the report that he's returned, cancel the broadcast. So I get in there, and I'm a 30-something-year-old cop, and I get the information, and I'm ready to leave. And mom looks at me and says, "Will you talk to our son, because we don't know what else to do?" And I'm like, what's a 30-something-year-old white guy going to tell a 12-year-old African American kid that's living in this kind of environment, great family home, but not the neighborhood? So I said, yeah, sure. I'll talk to him. And I did. I said a quick prayer, and I have no idea what to say to this kid. So I asked the parents, I said, well, can I just talk to him by myself, not you two being there? And they go, yeah, sure. So they took me in a little sitting room. This kid walked in, looking at the ground, never made eye contact with me, sat in a chair, and I was sitting in a chair, 4 or 5 feet away from him. And I'm telling you, I didn't talk to him for 5 minutes. And I kind of I talked to him like a parent, not like a cop. And I'm sure I didn't say anything his parents hadn't already said. And I left. I'm not exaggerating. 18 years later, I'm standing in line at Kroger's, getting my groceries checked out. And there's a old lady kind of behind me, and then some other people in line behind her. And this voice to my left goes, "Hey, Welsh, is that you?" Well, somebody calls you by your last name. They're either a cop or somebody you encountered as a cop. So I turn and look, and it's about a 6'3" black male, looked to be early 30s. And man, I went from yellow to red, like, what I arrest him for? I got my gun on my ankle and Uncle Mike's. What am I going to do with this little lady if this guy gets froggy? What am I going to do if he follows me out in the parking lot? And I'm just rapidly going through all these scenarios. And I pulled a General Mattis, be polite, be professional. but have a plan to, take care of business. So I looked at him and I was polite and professional. And I go, yes, that's my name. And he goes, you probably don't remember me. And I go, no, sir, I don't. He goes, when you were 12 years old, you came to my house because I hadn't come home from school. And I remembered that call. And I go, oh, yeah. He goes, I just want to tell you, I'm married, graduated college, have 2 daughters, and thank you. And I'm like, who's the butthole now, Because I'm thinking this is a bad guy. But that's a God moment. That God had me, that was his plan. I was the one to catch that call. I was the one to ask him, what do I do or say? Because I have no clue. And here 18 years later, I get to Paul Harvey. I get the rest of the story. And so I just really try to encourage people, no matter what you're going through, there is a purpose, there is a call. You just have to ask for the answer.
I find, excuse me, with the people that are hurting that I deal with, that they've often, they're angry at God. They've pushed away their faith. And with some of the things that they've seen and experienced, that's easy to understand, because you start to question how a quote good God would allow things like this to happen. And so as a person who understands the role that faith plays in healing, because it's a huge role, usually the people who don't have that fill that big chasm with all kinds of things like alcohol, drugs, sex, addictions, pornography, you name it. How do you share your faith with those people?
Well, and it's the mindset is, how would a loving God do this or allow this to happen? And I try to address that and take it out of the theological, take it out of the religious or whatever. And I go turn on that stove over there, that gas stove, turn it on high, and then stick your hand over it. Is God doing that to you? Is God allowing that to happen to you? No, you've chosen it. And so that God doesn't do bad things to good people, and God doesn't do bad things to bad people. It's our humanness and the things that happen are choices. And so when I talk with people, I try to share with them and put it in a non-religious kind of way, is what you're struggling with is because of what you're thinking up here. Everything begins with the thought, and your thoughts, they become attitudes, and then your attitudes are displayed in your behaviors, and your repeated behaviors become habits. So when you are facing, and I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but the bottom line for me is I constantly have to check myself of, I'm driving a car and somebody cuts me off, and I want to flip them off or lay on the horn or yell at him, and it's like, why do you want to do that? What's that going to accomplish? That's my gut reaction, because up here, that's what I'm thinking. So I try to share with people, when you're going through tough times, check how you're thinking. And is it easy to change how you think and get over grief? Most often when we get mad at God or we question God, it's because the crap has hit the oscillator. We're mad because it's not going the way I thought it should go, or the way I want it to go, or it's not fair that my kid died, or whatever it is, and your instinct is to blame somebody. God didn't do it to you, so quit thinking that, and then think, um, from the standpoint of uh, what can I do next? What should I be doing? And if it's asking somebody for help, if it's sharing your story, if it's literally, and I've done it. I live at 7,000 feet in Colorado. Is it can be blowing snow, and I'm just pissed. Is put on some clothes, put on some more clothes, and go take a walk. And and I don't. It sounds like like this is something easy to do. It's not. I mean, it's taken. I had a I had a boss that tried to get me fired on the police department, and it took me 5 years to forgive her. That's a long time. And in forgiveness, people say, well, how can you forgive somebody that wronged you? I said, well, because there's this dude that hung on a cross and said, forgive them for they know not what they do. Somebody may screw you over and they have no clue that how bad that has impacted your life. And maybe they didn't even do it intentionally. I don't care. Even if they did do it intentionally, you have to forgive. Doesn't say you have to reconcile and you have to become best friends. But I have found everybody, me included. I just had this conversation recently, as in like a week and a half ago, with someone who those in law enforcement would readily recognize some stuff. And this person told me the hardest thing I have is I can't forgive people. And so we're in a parking lot after having dinner together. And I gave him this forgiveness thing and told him, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. 5 years. Guess who was the only one that suffered of all that anger for 5 years? Not the person who tried to get me fired. And he called me 3 days ago. And he goes, Pat, I just have to tell you this. After I left you, I had an hour drive to go home. And I had a talk with God. Why can't I forgive this person? And he goes, guess what? I just said it out loud. And I said, he goes, and I'm not calling this guy and telling him I forgive him. He doesn't even know, how mad I am at him. But he goes, I just had to get rid of that. And he goes, I felt better because I intentionally said, I forgive you. I'm not reconciling with you. I'm never going to do business with you again. I don't even like you, but I forgive you. And that's a huge thing in the healing process when you're mad at God.
It's hard. I have had similar experiences. It's hard to forgive a moral injury or a betrayal. Excuse me, a betrayal of trust. There are a lot of things. And I appreciate you sharing that story. You told us about the 12-year-old boy. And because of your intervention, in part, his life course changed and he became a good man. And so if you were to go back in time and talk to your 12-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself?
No, you will never play college basketball. I wanted to be Pete Maravich, and be all that. And I was a little guy. And I say all that kind of to you. That's the first thing that comes to mind is tell your 12-year-old self, because I I entered high school and was 13 years. I graduated from high school. I was 17 years old. I was in college for 3 months before I turned 18. So I was always younger and littler. But one of the things I would, on a very serious note, would tell myself, which would have maybe changed the course of things. But again, God has His plan. Is I would tell myself, don't. People can give you advice, and they think it's advice, or they think they're being helpful. From literally, by the time I was 12, people were telling me, Pat, you'll make a great lawyer. I went to law school because that's what I thought everybody expected me to do, and that's what I was supposed to do. And I was not in a as a teenage kid. I was not in a faith relationship with God. I was going to church. I've never been to public school. I've been to Catholic school from first grade all the way through law school. I mean, I drilled cradle Catholic, and but I never in until my adult years, I never knew what that personal relationship with Christ and with God and the whole that I have a purpose and all that kind of enlightenment. I didn't have that as a 12-year-old. And so I wish, as a 12-year-old, or at least certainly a 17-year-old going into college, that I would have had developed that faith relationship. And I'm not nothing dramatic. That I don't want to get knocked off a horse like Saul, but I wish I would have had that, and that I had somebody in my life that would have shared that with me. And I'm not knocking the Catholic Church. I am still a very faith-filled, active, born-again Catholic, and that shocks a lot of people. And but I wish my 12-year-old self would have had that message and missed the opportunity to grasp it. And I'm glad I did grasp. And some of the stuff I'm sharing, I'm one on 66. Some of the stuff I'm sharing with you is I've only learned in the last 5 or 6 years. It's what I put my wife through for the 26 years of being a cop. I was 54 when I retired. I had no idea the impact that the career I always wanted was having the impact it was on her and her on the kids as well. Cops' kids don't talk about it a lot with their cop parent. So I'm sure there's things that I've done that they wish they could tell me, but they won't for whatever reason. But yeah, it's a journey. That's the thing, is you never arrive. We will eventually, that final breath you take. But then that's a whole new chapter of your journey. But so I don't want anybody to think, I'm telling you, I have sleepless nights. I own an international consulting company, and we've done stuff overseas in countries that you see on the news. That crap keeps you awake at night. But if you have a good foundation, both personally, physically, I'm not eating a bunch of junk. I try to take care of myself physically, emotionally, spiritually. It's kind of a whole package. And I know people that have had horrific physical disabilities that are the most faith-filled people I've ever met. So
it's amazing. It's amazing how many overlaps we have, brother, not just in name and Irish heritage, but in story too. And I see Paul nodding in the background too as you're talking, and Catherine and I, being the kids of cops, can relate to a lot of what you said from that perspective. But now being a cop with kids, I can relate from that perspective and the damage that I did. I don't want to miss the opportunity to tell you how much I appreciate you and your vulnerability. I think we just had a discussion in part about vulnerability and crying, and especially being Irish, you're not supposed to do that stuff. But it's something that I think is the true measure of a man, is when you're able to do that. That's a deeper sense of manhood and grasping your mission and who you are. And so I'm grateful for that. So we talked about going back to your 12-year-old self And I feel as, and man, my story is so similar because I wanted to be, I laugh when I say I wanted to be a Harlem Globetrotter when I was 12, except I don't play basketball very well. And I had to realize that. So I could have perhaps saved some time. But also, if I had shared this advice, I don't think I would have taken it because, of my own ego, something we talked about earlier. But my advice would have been to learn the word and learn it well, because it sustains you through those difficult times when you can pull that verse that you need. And you've done that several times during our conversation, and I appreciate that. So now, from this perspective, where we're at with a very tumultuous time in history, and for those of us who do have faith, to me, it looks like the future ahead of us may not be that good. It looks like we're entering a very difficult time, and a time of like one we haven't seen in our lifetimes. And so, what advice do you give to people who are fearful of that, what's looming ahead, watching the events of the world and worrying about the future of our country and our families, excuse me, and all of that? What advice do you give to people entering this new part of history that we've never seen before?
A couple of things. In what you just said, our parents said, or at least my parents said, in World War II, and their parents said in World War One. And in time, there always is these significant world crisis. I mean, the Jews in time of Christ, they were saying it about the Romans. So I get the perspective of the how bleak the future looks, and I understand that. And you use the word fear, and I'm not big on acronyms, but I actually have one for fear. Fear can mean forget everything and run, or face everything and respond. And so my advice to people when they're going through those challenging times, and it can even be good times. You have a newborn, it's your first child, you're on midnights, you're not going to get any sleep during the daytime, and you have that fear, that reaction of what am I going to do? Is, well, you can forget everything and run, ignore it, make it your wife's problem, make it your husband's problem, or you can face and respond. And here's the thing about responding, and I actually do this in the leadership course that I teach. You know the song "Dear Younger Me"?
No, I haven't heard that.
It's a Christian song by now the Mercy Me.
Oh,
I think
okay.
it sings it. So it's a song about what you would tell your younger self. Well, I've reverse engineered that, and this is a thing I actually do, is when I'm teaching a leadership class, the last day, I tell everybody two things. One, you have a life sentence, and your life sentence is this: what are people going to say about you at your funeral? That's your life sentence. Because in one sentence, they're going to share how you impacted their life. So if you drop dead today, what are they going to say tomorrow? Here's the challenge. What do you want them to say? What do you want your life sentence to be? How do you want to be remembered? And that's looking, forward. And I tell them, write it down. Write your life sentence down on a piece of paper. And then write down, what are you not doing to live that sentence you want them to say? So that's one thing. The other thing I tell them is write down 3 goals you're going to accomplish in the next 6 months. Write those goals down, not attempt to do. What are you actually going to accomplish? Whatever it is. I don't care what. Lose 20 pounds. Whatever you want. I don't care. And I don't want to see it. But write down 3 goals, and then what are you going to do to celebrate accomplishing those goals, even if nobody else knows? that you had these goals. What attaboy are you going to give yourself? Because psychologically and physiologically, that's encouraging. And it gives you a sense of accomplishment. It gives you purpose. It gives you confidence that you can set goals and achieve them. So celebrate that. And then put it in an envelope, write an address of where you want that letter to arrive in 6 months, and seal it. And then in 6 months, I'm gonna pay the postage and I'm gonna mail it to you. So as people are facing are challenging what we're going through these days, and Paul, man, you touched on something. I just got to share this because this is fresh injury, if you will. We were trying to do, the company I own, we were trying to help a mother. It was a custodial. He wouldn't return the child, and he's in a different state. She's in a different state. And so we were working with her through attorneys to make all that happen. And the court in his state said, give the child back now. And she had to make a 5-hour drive to go pick the child up. He murdered his kid and then killed himself. And that was just a week ago. And so how can you take that's a very personal, not a big worldly thing, but what do you do? What can you say to that person? Oh, well, I lost a child too. Well, great. And so how do I try to do that is address that fear. And then how can you face that? And how can I help you face that and respond, as opposed to, oh, well, if you call this 1-800 number, that's not helping. And then help them set goals and achieve them and celebrate those goals. So what your question was in the big picture, the big world picture, are the end times near, a kind of thing is, so what if they are? You don't have control over that. So what's going on in your life that you do have control over? And what could you be doing better? And if you truly believe the end is near, or maybe you have, life, you're in your last months of life. Okay, then what would you really love to do? And how can we help you achieve that? And then I know it sounds trite. Gratitude is an attitude, and here's one of the fundamental things about our human existence. Whatever you're looking for, you will always find more of it. And if you're looking for the worst in people, you will find the worst in them. If you're looking for the best in someone, even if it's not really great, if you're looking for it, you'll find it. If you're looking for happiness, if you're looking for a relationship with God, because that will change your life, if you keep looking for it, you will find what you're looking for. And if I'm looking for excuses to be mad, if I'm looking for excuses to, hey, I'm not going to give 100% because it's not going to matter anyway, so I need to come up with an excuse of, I'm sick, I'm not going to go to work today, and you're not really sick, you will always find more excuses. So I think in the big world picture, as in the world of politics, which, well, what are you looking for? And then what do you have control over? And if it's out of your control, then forget about it. What can you control that may have an impact? Like, I didn't have control over that 12-year-old's life. I'm not his parent. I'm not going to be there walking into school and all that kind of stuff. But in this moment, what impact, what influence can I share that may or may not make a difference? And and do your best at that. And it's a classic, and let God take care of the rest. I hate to say this, but there's a lot of special forces people. Is My job is to introduce people to God, and then God can take care of the rest. That's kind of a cold-hearted way of looking at it, but do what you can, and then genuinely trust God. He knows what He's doing. And you know what? If it is the end times, it is. So why ruin you're in the present. You're not in the end. You're in the present. Why ruin the present by worrying about what might happen?
Beautifully said. I have had the honor of hearing you speak and tell parts of your story before, but I just have to tell you, I'm very moved by everything you say. And one of the gauges I use when I'm trying to help a person is when my team and I leave the room, what conversations are still continuing. I think this is so good because there's so many questions and so many things floating around. And anybody who watches this is bound to have conversations and say, I heard this guy, Pat Welsh, and he said this. I love your acronym FEAR. I love what you did with that. And then the gratitude is an attitude. Although you said it's commonplace, I haven't heard that before. So I love that piece too. And I typed it as you were writing so I could save it. I gave you credit too. What I'd like to do, I know Paul has some questions, and I think this is a perfect place because there's so much you haven't told us, and there's so many more questions that you've generated about who you are. I think it's the perfect place for us to leave it there so that people have those questions and pursue them. And my hope is that people watch this together with other people they care about, because I think pausing it occasionally and having a conversation about what you're talking about would be the best way to watch this after the fact. And I do think that you're going to help some people with the short period of time you've spent with us, because you've helped me. And so I really appreciate you, brother. And I just want to give you my gratitude as an attitude and tell you that because I really appreciate you. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Excuse